My Mother, the Person and the Patient is an original podcast written and hosted by me, Fatuma Kuso. This podcast is about my mother, Timira Abdussamid Mohammed, Ayaya we call her, and that's the Somali word for grandmother, and her great-grandchildren call her Ayaya too, and that is their way of saying great-grandmother. As I shared in my previous episode, as a caregiver to my mother living with Alzheimer's, I faced a lot of challenges. And one of the greatest difficulties had been and remains to be finding a caregiver, especially if I needed to be out of town overnight or even few hours. When I am here, I have her caregiving organized. And if I lose a caregiver here and there, I step in and take it, even though sometimes it's difficult for me to physically do it on my own. But when I'm here, I am comfortable with the idea that if something falls through, like visits that's canceled, somebody who booked off last minute, the agency that didn't tell me the worker that was scheduled to come to my house was off for vacation. But the challenge is if I'm not here in the house in the evening, or I need to be away for overnight, for a weekend, that really is difficult. It's stressful to arrange care, and also stressful as I wait to make sure that person comes through for me and takes over. And I realize it's not really the world's easiest thing to be a 24-hour caregiver. That's even more difficult with my personality, that I don't really like to impose on other people. I don't like to put somebody else in a position where they cannot say no, but they don't really want to say yes either. So I'm selective in how I asked. And even before I asked, mind you, I'm paying for these services, but even before I asked, I am really uncomfortable because I am just thinking, is this person saying yes because they cannot say no to me? Or are they saying yes because they are willing to do it? So that's my question all the time. But the challenge, once I went through the obstacle, that's me, and I asked the person, and I get over the other obstacle that's kind of like worried about whether the person accepted and they're willing to do it, or they didn't accept. But then the third difficulty is worrying about the situation where I am away. That is, I found the biggest challenge to be. And I'm always anticipating getting calls of saying this happened or that happened. I'm on pins and needles anytime I am away. And I'm more so when I have somebody that's new. There are some ladies that come in that I feel 100% comfortable. Once they say yes, they will do a fantastic job, and they would not call me unless it's really an emergency. It's still finding the peace within the challenging situation, finding the joy and celebrating with my niece has made all the difference. When you listen to how we arrived at my mother's diagnosis and what followed, it's so easy to see her just as the patient, to see her as nothing more than the disease that reduced her to shell of her old self. But I want to also to tell you about my mother, the person, the fierce woman that told her stories unapologetically, celebrating the beautiful parts and harsh realities equally. I want to share with you the stories she told us about her life as a girl growing up in a small village, the tales that marked her adulthood. I want to share with you all her losses and the ultimate winnings. The following chapter is one of those stories reconstructed from my childhood memory. Timira didn't sleep her first night at the military base. She was tired, beyond tired, exhausted, but she could not rest. Mohammed had asked her to go to bed or at least sit down, but she couldn't for more than a few minutes, and laying down in bed and going to sleep was impossible. After trying to get her to stop, Mohammed joined Timiro. Perhaps he was hoping she would stop if he worked with her. That didn't happen. Even after the generator that powered the entire base was shut off at midnight, Timiro lit an oil lamp. She washed the floor under the fading light, even though the whole place seemed to have been cleaned with military precision for their arrival. She unpacked the tarps with their clothes in. She organized and reorganized them. Even after there was nothing to do, Timira walked back and forth, going one room to another, checking and rechecking she didn't know what. Next morning, Timira's hand shook as she picked up her son and tied him to her chest with a scarf. She pulled her daughter out of her cot, still sleeping. Unlike Luke, where she would have stood over them, smiling and watching their chest rising and falling, all she wanted to do now was to keep them close, skin to skin, for nowhere else was safe. In this dreadful city, the memory of making breakfast with the knowledge of her children safely tucked away in their beds filled her with longing. The thought of where and how she would buy food for her family occupied her mind. In Luke, she had built the community before she married Muhammad. Here, she had no one to help shield her from ending up in that awful market. She didn't know how long he was watching her, but Timiro felt her husband's presence without turning around to face him. She didn't want to make an eye contact. She couldn't bear to see his worried face. It was enough that she watched him last night as he tried to comfort her, to get her to rest, to sit down, to sleep, even though she could do none of it. Determined not to pull him into the depth of her fear like she had done last night, Timiro stared ahead until a man's voice pulled her back to reality. "Madam," a soldier stood before her. He bowed like the other one who met them in the truck yesterday had done. "I am here for you." Timiro didn't know what he meant by that. Unable to determine a course of action, she turned to her husband. Muhammad lifted Ruqya and stepped before Timiro. "He is here to show us around the base." Showing a newly arrived person their surroundings made sense to Timiro, but she didn't know why she needed a tour to see the base. She had her own house, and that was more than enough. Timira had no desire to know this place. To her, this was a sentence she needed to endure until another transfer came. Anywhere else would be better than Beit Abba, but she didn't say that. Instead, she let the thoughts simmer in her mind as she followed the man and her husband, her son still tied to her chest. The soldier walked ahead of Timira and her husband, approaching a large gray structure that housed the showers. Timiro could hear the rhythmic hum of water drops hitting the cement floor, the faint echoes of laughter and camaraderie from women inside. Stepping through the entrance, the scent of clean soap and the warmth of the humid air enveloped Timiro. The interior was well lit by the sun's rays that poured in, casting a soft, inviting glow on the rows of shower stalls that stretched before her. Each stall was a modest cubicle, separated by simple, olive green drap curtains. Above each stall, a nozzle protruded, capable of delivering a stream of water. It was a luxury amid the fear that surrounded her. The soldier moved ahead of Timira and her husband. He led them toward a large building with a metal gate. "Here's where you take the children when ill," he said, nestled amidst rows of sturdy barracks and training grounds. The building, constructed of stout concrete and sporting a facade of earth-toned bricks, stood as a bastion of strength and stability. Somalia's flag fluttered in front, its entrance flanked by imposing pillars. And when you are not well, the soldier stepped inside. Timira and her husband followed. Inside, the atmosphere transformed from a rigid military exterior to one of order and compassion. Soft, recessed lights bathed the lobby in a gentle glow, banishing harsh shadows and creating a welcoming aura. The hum of hushed voices gave the space an air of comfort. "This is where you eat," the soldier said before he opened the base's mess hall. Upon entering, the aroma of freshly prepared meals wafted through the air, filling Timiro with so much comfort. Hearing the bustling sound of trays clattering, voices mingling and chairs shifting on the cement floor, the fear and apprehension that filled her from the moment she heard the transfer dissipated. The mess hall was more than just a place to eat. For Timiro, it was a blanket of protection, for she didn't have to go to the market that took so much from her. My Mother, the Person and the Patient can be found in Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please remember to follow, like, and share, and join me next week as I share with you another episode of my mother's journey as both the person and the patient. Thank you.